There comes a point when she just stops chasing. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not some grand announcement or theatrical declaration. It's subtle, almost invisible at first, but over time, the shift becomes undeniable. She used to be the one who kept the conversations alive, who double texted, who tried to decode the silences and the vague responses. She showed up emotionally, even when the energy was never fully matched. She extended grace where there was distance, gave effort where there was hesitation, and held on to hope when the reality was asking her to let go. In the beginning, it was never about desperation, it was about belief. Belief that if she just loved harder, showed up more, stayed consistent, then maybe, just maybe, they would meet her halfway. But that halfway point never came. What did come was a pattern, one where she constantly gave and the other person gave just enough to keep her holding on. This is the emotional tug-of-war that avoidantly attached individuals often create, a dance of closeness and distance that leaves the other person exhausted from trying to hold the relationship together alone. Eventually, something inside her begins to shift. It's not born from anger, it's born from clarity. She starts to recognize that she's been giving energy to someone who doesn't know what to do with it. She starts to understand that no matter how many ways she tries to show up, it will never be enough for someone who's terrified of emotional intimacy. And that realization doesn't make her bitter, it makes her focused. She begins to redirect all of that emotional labor inward. The time she once spent analyzing texts or overthinking her every move is now used to build her life. She pours into her friendships, into her body, her career, her passions. She reconnects with her own joy, not the borrowed kind that only existed when they happened to be responsive. Her world expands because she stops shrinking herself to fit into the narrow emotional availability of someone else. This is when things start to feel different on the other side. The avoidant person, used to being the one in control of the emotional rhythm, begins to sense a shift. They notice the gap widening, not because she's pushing them away, but because she's stopped pulling them close. The silence that once made her anxious is now met with calm. She doesn't rush to fix the distance. She accepts it. And that acceptance creates a discomfort for someone who once relied on her, chasing to confirm their worth. She's not ignoring them to manipulate. She's simply not reaching anymore because she finally sees that her peace matters more than their mixed signals. The space that once felt like rejection now feels like protection. She no longer measures her days by whether or not they respond. She doesn't check her phone hoping for breadcrumbs. She's too immersed in building something real, something that includes her, fully and unapologetically. Where there used to be effort, now there's ease. Where there used to be anxiety, now there's alignment. She walks through her days with a different energy, not because she's pretending to be strong, but because she's finally reclaimed what she gave away for too long. Her power, her time, her self-worth. And the moment she stops chasing is the moment they realize they've lost the one person who was willing to love them through their walls. When she sets boundaries without apology, everything changes. It's not just about saying no to the things that once drained her. It's about redefining how she allows people to treat her. For too long, she bent herself into shapes that made others comfortable. She tolerated the late replies, the vague commitments, the emotional distance disguised as independence. She gave second, third, and fourth chances to someone who kept testing her limits under the excuse of needing space. Every time she adjusted, she convinced herself that being patient was a sign of strength, that loving someone meant accepting less than she deserved. But at some point, she starts to see the cost of all the bending. She feels the weight of always making room for someone who offers crumbs and calls it connection. And slowly, quietly, she begins to draw the line, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. She doesn't scream it or post about it or try to get even. She just changes the rules of access. She no longer entertains inconsistency. She no longer makes excuses for flakiness, avoidance, or emotional unavailability. What once felt confusing now feels crystal clear. People will only treat her with the level of respect she insists on. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks. And now, she decides who gets the key. She becomes intentional with her energy. When a message comes through late at night after days of silence, she doesn't rush to respond. She pauses. She checks in with herself first. Is this good for me? Does this feel aligned? She's no longer triggered into reaction. She chooses how and when she engages. She's not afraid to walk away from half effort. She no longer fears losing someone who doesn't know how to value her in the first place. What used to feel like confrontation now feels like protection. She's not looking for drama, she's just no longer available for confusion. She stops over-explaining herself, stops justifying her standards, and lets her actions do the talking. If someone wants to be part of her life, they're going to have to show up with clarity, not chaos. She makes peace with the idea that setting boundaries might disappoint some people, especially those who benefited from her lack of them. But she's not here to be easy, she's here to be real. People who are avoidantly attached often thrive in spaces where boundaries are blurred. They feel safe when they can control the pace of connection, withdraw when they feel too seen, and re-enter when it feels convenient. But when she sets boundaries, it interrupts that cycle. It removes the power of emotional control. It forces clarity, and clarity is uncomfortable for someone who prefers things to stay undefined. So when she starts saying, "I don't accept that," or "this doesn't work for me," it's not just a statement, it's a disruption, a wake-up call, a line in the sand. She starts to honor her time differently. She leaves read messages unread when they don't come with effort. She says no to plans that feel last minute or transactional. She stops rearranging her life for someone who never prioritized her. And this doesn't come from a place of spite. It comes from finally seeing her own worth. Her boundaries are no longer negotiable. They're not meant to scare people off, but to filter out the ones who are only there for convenience. Where she once tolerated chaos, she now demands clarity. Where she once explained, she now exits. And as she becomes more rooted in this version of herself, something shifts in the energy around her. The ones who used to hold emotional power start to feel that grip loosen. Because she no longer tries to be chosen by someone else. She chooses herself first, without guilt, without apology, without delay. She glows up emotionally and physically. Not to prove a point, but because she's finally pouring into herself instead of emptying herself for someone else. It's not revenge, and it's not a performance. It's a return to the version of herself she lost while trying to keep a one-sided connection alive. When she was caught in the cycle with an avoidant, so much of her energy went into guessing, hoping, overthinking. Her mind was always a step ahead or behind, never at peace, always bracing for disappointment or clinging to fleeting moments of closeness. That kind of emotional strain shows up everywhere, in her face, her posture, her spirit. It dulls her. It takes away the spark she used to carry so naturally. But when she finally lets go, that energy has to go somewhere, and she decides to let it come back to her. She starts caring for herself in ways she once reserved only for others. She starts moving her body not to punish it, but to celebrate it. Her workouts shift from something she had to do to something that reconnects her to her power. She eats in a way that fuels her instead of numbing herself with comfort. She starts sleeping better, not because the world outside has changed, but because the war inside her mind is quieting. And then there's the emotional glow up. That's the one that turns heads long before any physical change is noticed. She starts talking to herself differently. She stops internalizing someone else's avoidance as her unworthiness. She realizes that their inability to connect was never her failure. It was their fear. That clarity is liberating. It softens her. It makes her more magnetic. Not because she's trying to attract anyone, but because she's no longer trying to chase love that doesn't feel safe. There's a calm that starts to settle in her, one that radiates in every room she walks into. She doesn't need to be loud. Her energy speaks for her. She picks up old passions that she set aside, books that went unread, hobbies that were paused, friendships that were neglected while she prioritized someone who couldn't even give her consistency. Slowly, she builds a life that excites her again. She starts planning weekends around things that light her up, not around the off chance that maybe they'll reach out. Her world grows fuller, richer, more alive. And in that fullness, something shifts in how she carries herself. There's a new presence in her, a kind of confidence that doesn't ask for permission. The glow-up isn't always visible right away, but the people around her feel it. The way she walks into a room differently, the way she holds eye contact, the way she laughs without hesitation. She doesn't need to post about her growth. She is the post. She doesn't need to prove she's moved on. Her joy does that for her. What was once dimmed by emotional exhaustion is now ignited by self-love and alignment. She doesn't need someone to validate her worth when she's already living in it. And here's the thing about avoidant partners. They often come back around when they feel you've detached. When they sense that your energy has shifted, that you're no longer emotionally anchored to them, that's when they become curious. Not always because they've changed, but because the dynamic they once controlled is gone. And now they're on the outside looking in. Watching someone they took for granted becomes someone they can no longer reach in the same way. Watching the glow up they never thought would happen because they assumed she'd always wait, always try, always hope. But now she's too busy becoming, too busy evolving, too busy being everything she was always capable of being once she stopped giving her light to someone who only ever dimmed it. She starts connecting with people who actually show up, and everything about her energy shifts. For a long time, she was caught in the loop of waiting for a response, waiting for clarity, waiting for someone to finally step up and meet her where she was. That kind of waiting turns into emotional starvation. It conditions you to accept inconsistency as the norm, to mistake breadcrumbs for meals, and to believe that showing up halfway is just how relationships work. But then something inside her breaks, not in a destructive way, but in a freeing one. She gets tired. Not the kind of tired that leads to despair, but the kind of tired that sparks change. She's no longer willing to be available to people who are only emotionally available when it suits them. So she begins to shift her attention. She starts noticing the ones who reach out first, the friends who check in without an agenda, the new people she meets who ask her questions and actually listen to her answers, the conversations that don't leave her wondering where she stands. She begins to see how different it feels to be met instead of managed, pursued instead of pacified, valued instead of tolerated. And once she gets a taste of that kind of connection, the old dynamic loses its appeal. She no longer confuses unpredictability with chemistry. She stops mistaking emotional distance for mystery. She finally sees that being with someone who's consistent isn't boring, it's peace. And peace is something she hadn't realized she was craving all along. These new connections reflect back to her the truth she had buried under all the overthinking and emotional labor. She's not hard to love. She was just trying to love someone who wasn't ready. When she's in the presence of someone who doesn't flinch at intimacy, who can hold space without pulling away, she feels the difference in her nervous system. There's no spike in anxiety, no need to overanalyze tone or timing. It's just ease, safety, presence. She starts to thrive in this environment because she's finally allowed to be fully seen and not just partially accepted. This kind of emotional nourishment becomes addictive. It feeds her in ways she didn't know she was starving. It makes her question why she ever tolerated anything less. And as she continues to engage with people who are emotionally available, she realizes something even more powerful. Her standards are rising not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. She's no longer interested in being the exception in someone's life. She wants to be the priority, and now she knows it's possible. It's not just romantic relationships where this shift happens. She starts reconnecting with friends she may have unintentionally drifted from while chasing after someone who kept her guessing. She deepens bonds with people who reflect her growth back to her, not those who remind her of her past patterns. She creates space for new relationships, not just with others, but with herself. That inner dialogue starts to sound different, kinder, more grounded, more affirming. As she builds a circle of people who see her, hear her, and choose her consistently, she becomes less available to the kind of connections that made her doubt herself. Her heart opens wider, not to the past, but to the potential of what's ahead. She's not guarded. She's just selective now. She's no longer waiting for someone to finally choose her. She's choosing herself every single day and surrounding herself with people who reflect that choice. She realizes that emotional availability is not a rare miracle. It's the bare minimum in healthy connection. And once she steps into this new environment of emotional safety and mutual effort, she starts to understand just how damaging the old dynamic really was. She doesn't need intensity anymore. She needs intimacy. Not chaos, but clarity. Not distance, but depth. And for the first time in a long time, she's found it. Not because she chased it, but because she stopped settling for what was never enough. She no longer reacts. She responds with graceful distance. That shift may seem small on the surface, but it changes everything. In the past, she used to react immediately. The silence, the inconsistency, the emotional pullbacks, they triggered something deep in her, something tied to worth and survival. She'd scramble to fix it, to reconnect, to decode what she did wrong. Her emotions were always on high alert, dancing to the rhythm of someone else's avoidance. It wasn't because she lacked self-control, it was because she cared deeply, too deeply for someone who was never truly present in the way she needed. But now she operates differently. She's no longer trying to win love by proving her patience or auditioning her loyalty. She's done reacting to breadcrumbs as if they were signs of change. She's done making excuses for inconsistent behavior just to keep the fantasy alive. Her nervous system, once hijacked by the unpredictability, has now found calm. The emotional chaos that once dictated her behavior has given way to stillness. That stillness becomes her power. Not silence used as a weapon, but space used as a boundary. She doesn't need to clap back. She doesn't need to send long texts filled with explanations or demands. Her energy speaks louder than any words ever could. The difference between reacting and responding is intention. Reactions are fast, emotional, and fueled by a desire to feel seen or heard in the moment. Responses are grounded. They're chosen. She now takes the time to ask herself what serves her before giving away her energy. When he disappears for days and suddenly reappears with a casual message, she doesn't jump to reply. She pauses. Not because she's playing games, but because she values her peace more than she values temporary validation. That pause is not manipulation. It's maturity. It's clarity. It's her way of choosing herself over a cycle that once drained her. Avoidants often rely on the pattern, they pull away and the other person reaches. They disconnect and the other person fights for the connection. But when she stops reacting and starts responding with calm detachment, that dynamic breaks. He no longer gets the emotional spike he's used to. There's no more drama to feed off. No more proof that she's still emotionally hooked. She no longer rises to the bait because she sees it now. The pattern, the loop, the predictability of a dance she used to call love. That graceful distance doesn't mean she's cold. It means she's centered. It means she's done performing emotional labor for someone who's not willing to meet her in vulnerability. It means she's allowed herself to feel the discomfort of detachment and she's come out stronger. She doesn't suppress her emotions. She simply refuses to let them drive her decisions when the cost is her dignity. When she responds now, it's with intention, a simple, respectful boundary, a quiet redirect, a decision not to engage. And that restraint, that self-command, creates more impact than any emotional outburst ever could. People start to notice that change, especially the ones who used to count on her emotional availability. They begin to sense that they no longer occupy the same space in her world, and while they may not know exactly what changed, they feel it. She's no longer tethered to their validation. She's no longer emotionally tangled in their inconsistency. That calm, composed presence isn't aloofness. It's self-respect in motion. It's the embodiment of everything she learned from the emotional turbulence they created. She learned how to hold herself, how to self-soothe, how to wait before speaking, breathe before acting, and walk away when the energy doesn't feel reciprocal. There's a quiet power in how she now handles what used to undo her. The missed calls, the emotional unavailability, the hot and cold behavior, they no longer provoke urgency. She doesn't spiral, she doesn't chase closure, she simply chooses her next move with grace, rooted in the knowledge that her peace is too expensive to gamble on someone who treats connection like a convenience. That grace, that calm response, becomes her shield, and it's in that shift, from reaction to response, from urgency to clarity, that she reclaims everything she once gave away.